January 1945. The year's icy grip held Western Europe fast, mirroring the chilling reality facing the German army. The Ardennes offensive, Hitler's desperate gamble to cleave Allied lines, had bled out in the snow-laden forests. Now, the relentless Allied advance pushed the Wehrmacht back, inch by painful inch, towards the ever-shrinking borders of the Third Reich. Only a single, significant foothold remained on French soil: the Colmar Pocket, a strategically vital area encompassing critical Rhine bridges. Here, amidst a landscape scarred by relentless combat, the German High Command, desperate to maintain their grip, unleashed fierce counterattacks, a futile attempt to stem the tide and drive back the encroaching American forces. It was across these very fields, on the 26th day of that brutal month, that a young officer, Lieutenant Audie Murphy, would etch his name into the annals of military history, performing a feat of almost unimaginable bravery, a one-man stand that defied comprehension. Even before that fateful day, the name Audie Murphy carried a certain weight, a whispered respect amongst the weary soldiers of the veteran 15th Infantry Regiment. He was, in many ways, an unlikely hero. Born into the hard-scrabble life of a Texan farming family in 1925, Audie was not a physically imposing figure. When he had attempted to enlist in the US Army at the tender age of 17, back in June of 42, his youthful features and slight build nearly cost him his chance. The Army doctors, scrutinizing his frame, measured him at a mere 5 feet 4 inches, his weight barely tipping the scales at 112 pounds. His slender build and boyish face quickly earned him the affectionate, albeit somewhat condescending nickname Baby during his training. But as events would soon prove, Audie possessed an inner reservoir of courage and skill that far outweighed his diminutive stature, a fierce determination that burned brighter than any physical attribute. His baptism by fire came in North Africa in February 1943. Assigned to Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, he swiftly impressed his superiors with his quick thinking, his sharp instincts, and his remarkable marksmanship. He possessed a preternatural ability to assess a situation, identify the critical threat, and neutralize it with lethal efficiency. July saw him landing at Licata, Sicily, marking the commencement of a relentless period of frontline combat that would not cease until the cessation of hostilities in May 1945. He was constantly hungry for action, always volunteering for the most dangerous missions. This unwavering dedication earned him a promotion to corporal by late July. He was at the forefront of the American forces that landed at Salerno, where, in a display of audacious bravery, he single-handedly charged and silenced a German machine gun nest that had effectively pinned down his entire platoon, allowing them to advance. By December, he had ascended to the rank of sergeant. Fighting, within the perilous confines of the Anzio bridgehead, he distinguished himself yet again. He single-handedly neutralized a German tank driving back a determined enemy assault in the process. This act of valor earned him the Bronze Star, a testament to his courage under fire. Despite enduring multiple bouts of illness, each one threatening to sideline him, Murphy resolutely refused to be evacuated to a hospital. On one occasion, he had to be forcibly dragged to an aid station. Even then, it was only a matter of time before he wrangled his way back into the thick of the fighting. Relanding in France as part of Operation Dragoon in August 1944, he continued his relentless pursuit of the enemy. He eliminated 2 snipers, concealed within the ruins of a shattered village, and single-handedly disabled another machine gun nest, actions that earned him the Distinguished Service Cross. In October of that same year, Murphy achieved an almost unbelievable feat, earning 2 Silver Stars in the span of just 3 days. He fought his way through a series of meticulously planned German ambushes, personally killing and capturing dozens of enemy soldiers. These extraordinary acts of bravery also earned him a rare battlefield commission, a testament to his exceptional leadership abilities, his tactical acumen, and his unwavering courage. But these victories came at a heavy price. Shot in the hip by a hidden sniper, he developed a severe case of gangrene and was hospitalized for several months. Yet, even this near-fatal wound could not keep him from the fight. He discharged himself from the hospital against medical advice and rejoined his unit, determined to see the war through to its bitter end. By January 1945, Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy, a mere 19 years of age, led Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment. They found themselves embroiled in the brutal, unforgiving fighting around the Colmar Pocket. In the preceding days, they had been engaged in heavy fighting, tasked with the arduous job of clearing the Germans from their entrenched positions. Company strength had been decimated, reduced from over 100 men to a paltry 40. Murphy, who had once been a private within the ranks of that very company, now found himself in command, responsible for the lives of the men under his charge. Little did they know that they were standing directly in the path of an imminent and overwhelming German counterattack. Historical records indicate that the 30th Infantry Division, to which the 15th Regiment was attached, was holding a defensive position just outside the village of Holtzwehr by the end of January. The precise location of the battle, however, had become shrouded in the fog of war, lost to the passage of time in the years following the conflict. Murphy himself provided a valuable clue in his memoirs, a description that offered a vital framework for locating the battlefield. "We're at the butt end of a rough U-shape," he wrote, "whose sides are formed by finger-like extensions of the wood stretching toward Holtzwehr. Directly before us are flat open fields, beyond which I can see a church steeple, stable, and housetops in the village, a mile away. The narrow road over which we've been pounding our feet leads from the woods to the town. Using this information, coupled with the aid of modern technology, researchers were able to pinpoint the location of Murphy's U-shaped woods, the road leading from the forest to the village, and the village itself solidifying our understanding of the landscape upon which these momentous events transpired. It was along this tree line that Murphy and his 40 men were positioned, a thin line of resistance against a potentially devastating enemy assault. Their primary armoured support consisted of 2 M10 tank destroyers, each armed with a powerful 3-inch gun. One of these vehicles was stationed on the road that stretched from the woods towards Holtzwehr, serving as a crucial point of defence. The second was positioned approximately 40 yards ahead of the main line, closer to the village, providing a more advanced line of observation and fire support. Murphy selected a spot within a drainage ditch alongside the main road, about 10 yards ahead of the rear tank destroyer. This location served as his command post, a place from which he could observe the battlefield, communicate with his troops, and direct artillery fire. He was armed with his M1 carbine, a pair of binoculars for observing enemy movements, a map for navigating the terrain, and a field telephone for communicating with headquarters. The conditions for the men of B Company were far from ideal. The ground was frozen solid, making it virtually impossible to dig foxholes or create any meaningful form of defensive cover. The men were forced to constantly move around in the snow to prevent their feet from succumbing to frostbite, a relentless struggle against the elements. Furthermore, the main American support was stationed approximately a mile to their rear, awaiting the arrival of fresh troops before advancing to reinforce the line. With the Germans still in control of the northern end of Holtzwehr, a mere 400 yards away, these open fields effectively constituted a no-man's land, a zone of imminent danger. Murphy, acutely aware of the precariousness of their situation, understood the catastrophic potential of a German counterattack. Consequently, he ordered his men to prepare a secondary defensive line several hundred meters deeper into the woods, where the dense foliage offered better protection from enemy fire. He hoped they would never need it, but in war, hope was a dangerous substitute for preparedness. His deepest fears materialized at approximately 2 p.m. on the 26th of January. The ominous rumble of engines echoed from within Holtzwehr, a sound that sent a shiver down the spines of the men of B Company. Moments later, the source of the noise became terrifyingly clear. No less than 6 Jagdpanther tank destroyers, formidable machines of war, emerge from the mist-shrouded village, their guns trained towards the American lines. To compound their predicament, the German armour was closely followed by an estimated 250 infantrymen, clad in white camouflage against the snowy landscape, advancing in skirmish order under the protection of a heavy artillery barrage. The air crackled with the sound of exploding shells and the whine of incoming fire. Seeing the overwhelming threat and knowing that his undermanned company possessed no weapons capable of effectively stopping the armoured assault, save perhaps the Wolverine tank destroyers, he immediately ordered his men to prepare to withdraw to the secondary defensive line within the woods. Simultaneously, he grabbed the field telephone and began calling in artillery fire on the approaching enemy, hoping to disrupt their advance and buy his men some precious time. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The rear Wolverine was struck by a direct hit from enemy fire, instantly killing the commander and gunner. Smoke billowed from the disabled vehicle as the surviving crew members, fearing an imminent explosion, abandoned their post and fled towards the rear under a hail of enemy fire. The second Wolverine, positioned in a more exposed location, put up a valiant fight, firing continuously as it attempted to reverse back into the relative safety of the tree line. However, Murphy later recalled the disheartening sight of seeing the M10's 90mm shells striking the frontal armour of the Jagdpanthers, only to ricochet off harmlessly, causing no visible damage. The situation lurched from bad to worse when the remaining M10, attempting to reverse, slid off the roadway and into the drainage ditch, becoming hopelessly stuck. Its main gun was now angled in such a way that it was rendered useless for defensive purposes. With no way to extract the vehicle, Sergeant Hines and his crew abandoned ship, leaving Company B to face the full force of the German onslaught alone. Murphy, recognizing that his men stood a better chance of survival within the stronger defensive line in the woods, barked out the order to retire, while he, at tremendous personal risk, remained in full view of the enemy to call in artillery fire and cover their withdrawal. Company B's platoon sergeant, Elmer Brawley, provided a vivid account of the scene. As we withdrew, he later testified, hundreds of infantrymen poured out of the woods, firing automatic weapons as they came. Lieutenant Murphy stayed on at his command post, under a pine tree at the edge of the woods, and directed artillery fire by telephone upon the advancing tanks and infantrymen. The enemy tanks crashed through on both our flanks, firing persistently at the lieutenant and shattering branches of trees at his side with shell fragments. In a storm of machine gun fire from the tanks, he coolly went on telephoning fire orders. The hostile tanks charged by Lieutenant Murphy's command post, coming within 50 yards as they passed, and firing at him, but apparently they wanted to avoid the burning tank destroyer, and so didn't come any closer. With only one visible target remaining on the open field, Murphy became the sole focus of the German attack. He was subjected to a relentless hail of bullets, a maelstrom of metal and fire. Miraculously, he remained unscathed, firing his carbine until his ammunition was exhausted. He then made the perilous decision to move 10 yards to his rear, seeking cover behind the burning tank destroyer, an act of either incredible bravery or suicidal folly. The tank destroyer was in the very heart of the German advance, and in imminent danger of its own ammunition or fuel igniting, potentially causing a catastrophic explosion. Lieutenant Weiss Fenning, an artillery forward observer who had relocated to Company B's line after his own communications were knocked out, witnessed the unfolding drama. While we attempted to hold off the tanks with directed artillery fire and bazooka rockets, he recounted, the crowded infantry line, consisting of 2 full-strength companies of 125 men each, surged across the open meadow at a wide arc. As they advanced, they fired their machine pistols and rifles at Lieutenant Murphy. Then I saw Lieutenant Murphy do the bravest thing I've ever seen any man do in combat. With the Germans only 100 yards away and still moving up on him, he climbed onto the slowly burning tank destroyer and began firing the .50 caliber machine gun at the crowds. There he was, completely exposed and silhouetted against the background of bare trees and snow, with a fire under him that threatened to blow the destroyed vehicle apart. 88mm shells, machine gun, machine pistol, and rifle fire crashed all around him. Murphy, perched atop the burning wreckage, unleashed a torrent of .50 caliber rounds into the oncoming German infantry, inflicting heavy casualties and driving the survivors to ground. He was aided in part by a stroke of luck. Fearing the imminent explosion of the tank destroyer, or perhaps believing that it was still occupied by a surviving crew, the German armour steered clear, providing Murphy with a degree of cover amidst the smoke and flames. For the next 30 minutes he held off all German attempts to advance towards his position, alternating between firing the machine gun and calling in precise artillery strikes on enemy troops, all while standing on a vehicle that could explode at any moment. In classic Murphy fashion, he would later write, "I'm conscious only that the smoke and turret afford a good screen, and for the first time in 3 days, my feet are warm." Unable to advance deep into the woods, and dissuaded by the occasional bazooka round and Murphy's relentless fire, the German armour paused in the field, awaiting the arrival of their infantry. From the German perspective, the devastating .50 caliber fire was now the major obstacle, and all attention shifted to neutralising that threat. Units began creeping forward under covering fire, attempting to identify and outflank the exposed position. On 2 separate occasions, German tank rounds slammed into Murphy's M10, engulfing it in clouds of smoke. Each time, miraculously, Murphy reappeared and continued firing, seemingly immune to the chaos around him. From his precarious perch, Murphy had to simultaneously fire the machine gun, call in artillery orders, evade German artillery and tank rounds, and keep a watchful eye on his exposed flanks. A moment of near disaster occurred when, peering through the smoke, he spotted movement just a few yards away. A swivelling of the 50 cal averted disaster. He saw a group of 12 German soldiers in the act of emerging from a ditch, preparing to rush his position and surely kill him. He opened fire on them from a distance of just 10 yards, eliminating them to a man. Despite this victory, the situation remained desperate. Murphy once again called back for artillery support. The radio operator on the other end of the line, overwhelmed by the intensity of the situation, asked, "How close are they?" Murphy responded with the now legendary reply, "Just hold the phone, and I'll let you talk to one of the bastards." If there was any remaining doubt about the peril he faced, his next coordinates for artillery fire made it starkly apparent. He was calling fire onto his own position. Moments later, American shrapnel mingled with German steel, buzzing and clanging off the burning tank destroyer in a desperate attempt to break the enemy attack. His luck held, but his leg, wounded earlier, reopened, drenching his uniform in blood. He fought on, hammering the hard-pressed Germans who, finally after more than an hour of fighting against one man, began to falter. PFC Abraham Abramsky, watching from the Company B line, recalled the scene. For an hour he held off the enemy, single-handedly fighting against impossible odds. When his last round of ammunition was spent, Lieutenant Murphy climbed painfully down from the top of the tank destroyer and made his way back to our position. Although his wound looked really bad, he refused to wait for treatment. He reorganized the company and led us in an attack which swept the German force back into the woods they had come from. After he had done that, he stopped for first aid right on the field, but he wouldn't take evacuation. He concluded, "The fight that Lieutenant Murphy put up was the greatest display of guts and courage I've ever seen. There's only 1 in a million who'd be willing to stand up on a burning vehicle loaded with explosives and hold off 250 crowds for an hour, and do all that while he was wounded. He must have killed and wounded about 100 of them with the direct artillery and the caliber fire." Murphy himself recalled that shortly after climbing down from the M10 and making his way rearward, under fire he heard the ammunition on the tank destroyer explode. Had he remained in the vicinity for just a few more minutes, he would have undoubtedly been killed. Without overstatement, Murphy's actions, with the indispensable support of the artillery, halted the German attack and prevented the remnants of Company B from being surrounded and destroyed. Today, on the very spot of that extraordinary act of heroism, stands a memorial to Audie Murphy and all the men of the 30th Division who fought and died in the liberation of France. The reports of his bravery quickly spread. He was recommended for and rightly received the highest award for gallantry available to US servicemen, the Medal of Honor, presented to him on June 2, 1945, near Salzburg, Austria. On that day, Murphy was to receive several awards, including the Legion of Merit, presented by Lieutenant General Alexander Patch, who reportedly whispered to the equally shy Murphy, "I wonder if you're as nervous as I am?" Murphy's reply, "Yes, sir, I'm afraid I am." First Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy returned to the US in August 1945, just a few days before his 21st birthday, and was released from active duty the following month. He eventually accepted an appointment as captain in the National Guard in July 1950, and was recommended for major, but not having sufficient academic qualifications to hold the rank, a special board had to be convened to adjudicate the case. The memo sent to the Chief of the National Guard detailed the matter, including a review of Captain Murphy's record that included the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, Legion of Merit, Bronze Star Medal with V device and Oak Leaf Cluster, Purple Heart with Second Oak Leaf Cluster, American Campaign Medal, European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 1 Silver Service Star, 3 Bronze Stars and 1 Bronze Arrowhead, the World War II Victory Medal, the Combat Infantry Badge, the Marksman Badge with Rifle Expert Badge with Bayonet Bar, French Fourragère in colours of the Croix de Guerre, French Legion of Honour, Croix de Chevalier, French Croix de Guerre with Silver Star, and the Belgian Croix de Guerre with Palm. After careful consideration, it was decided that Murphy, the most decorated American serviceman of the Second World War, probably did have the necessary qualifications. Upon returning to civilian life, Murphy was thrust into the role of national celebrity, resulting in an acting career consisting of more than 40 feature films, including many westerns. His most famous role, though, was as himself in the 1955 film To Hell and Back, based on his own autobiography. Despite success in his film career, Murphy lived with PTSD and slept with a pistol under his pillow. He did significant work to support fellow servicemen. On one Veterans Day in the 1950s, Audi was asked in an interview what the most memorable day of the war was for him, and he responded, "I think it was. I was on a train going for a little rest for, about a 3 or 4 day pass, and I heard the announcement that the war in Europe was over, and there's nothing that could top that for me." When pressed if that was his most memorable day, he replied that it certainly was, because then, as I say, those 3 years had seemed much longer than they really were, and I saw a lot of good men come and go, and a lot of them, especially on this day, you're still there. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy and 5 others took off from DeKalb Airport in Atlanta, Georgia, on board a twin-engine Aero Commander bound for Martinsville, Virginia. The plane never arrived. It was found that the aircraft had struck mountains in bad weather, killing all 6 on board. Audie Leon Murphy was just